Welcome to Here's How We Get There. It's the daily show filled with conversations about business and mental health in a down-to-earth style with real-world language. Now let's dive in with your co-hosts, Kenneth Shark Kinney and Trey Tucker.
All right, Trey, today is 9/11. It's another day to remember what happened 22 years ago, it's just hard to imagine that it was 22 years ago. But talk about what that day means to you and how you reflect on it.
So as I was thinking about it just a couple minutes ago, it hit me. 9/11 was one of the first times that I ever actually considered becoming a therapist. And it's a weird connection, I know, but when I saw the collective trauma that happened to a whole nation and what that did to our psyche, and then also what it did to my psyche, even though I really had no personal connection to it, but just the depressing impact that it had on me and true trauma, it fascinated me about just how do we handle news that affects us as a group, and then also as how does the whole group affect or deal with that trauma. And so it was bone chilling to see what it did to everybody and what the nation had to do to recover. But from a more hopeful standpoint, it was actually a time that, at least in my lifetime, that was the most unified that I remember seeing our country, because we bonded together. We overlooked our differences because we had a common goal and, frankly, a common enemy. And I don't know if that can even happen again at this point, but it was a landmark day. I remember also the other thing is we didn't have phones to keep us up to date on what was happening. So we all had to gather around television sets and around different computers, and it was a more communal experience. Whereas I think maybe nowadays we would all retreat to the phones and not be around each other, which brings less healing. What do you think?
Well, we did have phones, and they just weren't the iPhone. And so,
true.
but that just goes to the point that, Gen Z, for example, which you and I are just a year or two too old for that group, but Gen Z, they haven't lived through this experience. So it's hard to explain to a big chunk of the population today what really happened. It's almost like talking about something in the revolutionary period, because was pre, especially the iPhone, but pre-social media and when everything really took place. But I saw a lot of people, and I had spent a lot of time in New York, and I remember calling my best friends in New York who were watching everything going down, screaming and crying, and didn't know how to deal with everything. And you're absolutely right. It was one of the last times that I can remember where we were all pulled together as a nation in support, very patriotic around it. I remember when they first came back and played the first baseball game, when they played the first football game, and everything else. These were shared experiences. There weren't 1,000 commercials on TV. We were glued to what was going on and how this was going to change us forever. And if you think about how it's changed us, it's such a little inconvenience for the price that the people that lost their lives and their families that they paid. And so I think it's important, whether it's the 22nd year or it's the whatever year, to remember this historically really important time, or really period of time to us. This day changed us forever, whether it was at the Pentagon, in the field in Pennsylvania, or at the Twin Towers that came down. They were such a symbol of freedom. And I know we've tried to replicate that with one tower. It's not quite the same. But it does show, really, I think, the idea of just being able to pull together and grieve together. It was a very shared experience, and not that you would ever want people to grieve together again to see that kind of experiment, if you will. But it did show that we can get past politics for 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
So, everybody say your prayers, and hope we don't ever have to see anything like that happen again, and make certain that you remember all the wonderful things that this country stands for, whatever your political beliefs are. Take care.
Thank you for joining Shark and Trey on the Here's How We Get There show. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit here'showwegetthere.com. That's here'showwegetthere.com.